A very good afternoon, dear listeners of class 10th English. So, children, today we are going to start with the first story of our book, The First Flight. Right? So, title of the story is A Letter to God. So, I'm not pretty sure, but I feel that this story was somewhere prescribed in one of your previous classes as well. So, you must have read this story before, but we would read it today again, right? So, A Letter to God is a story that is written by a Mexican writer whose name is Gregorio Lopez y Fuentes. He is famous as G.L. Fuentes, right? So he was one of the most important chroniclers of Mexican Revolution and its effects. So the story A Letter to God presents the infinite faith of a man in God. Children, the hero of the story, the protagonist, you may say, the hero of the story, whose name is Lencho, Lencho, right? Lencho. He experiences a great disturbance in his life, and which makes him too much worried, right? So, but he believes that like whatever may happen in his life, whatever worst situation may come, one helping hand would always be there for him, and that helping hand is nobody but God Himself, right? So he expects that if no one can help him, at least God would be in that capacity to fulfill his wishes, right? So the writer G.L. Fuentes gives here a very clear description of the faith of faith of man in God. You won't believe, not only we call it faith, it's blind faith of man that he has put in God, and out of his sheer simplicity, innocent mind, right? So what he does, he goes to the extent of writing a letter to God. That's why the title is A Letter to God. Ki Lencho goes to the extent of writing a letter to God. Means like he has such a firm faith on God, he has such a firm belief on God, that he writes a letter to him. Means he literally believes that God would listen to his talk and would help him in his tough times, right? So that is already strange enough for the audience, right? So see what happens in the story afterwards. So we would be reading from the text, this page. Yes, page number 3. Page number 4, right? So, first of all, children, the description of his house has been given, right? So, the author describes the story in the form of, such an incident that may be humorous for a few readers, that may be, that may shake the minds of a few readers, right? And that may make no difference to the others. So different perspectives are there. So let's read the text of the story. See, he says, the house, the only one in the entire valley, sat on the crest of a low hill. So, thanks to the editor, some of the meanings are given there. Crest is considered the part that is on the top of a hill, right? So, the house, of course, Lencho's house is being talked about in this line. So, the house, the only one in the entire valley, his house was the only one that was in that entire valley, right? So that was on the top of a hill. So from this height, one could see the river, the field of ripe corn dotted with flowers that always promised a good harvest. Always promised a good harvest means every year Lancho used to earn a sufficient amount of money from his cornfield, right? So one could see river from the site of his house and his field of ripe corn that was decorated with flowers, ripe corn flowers, right? So that could be seen from Lencho's house that was on the top of a hill, right? So his field always promised him a good harvest. It means he used to get a good collection of money, means that was suffice for his family, like that much collection of money from his crops, right? Next is, the only thing the earth needed was a downpour or at least a shower. So downpour or at least a shower here stands for, rain, right? So the only thing for which Lancho was dependent upon the will of God was rain, right? So throughout the morning, Lancho, who knew his fields intimately, but intimately means very closely, had done nothing else but see the sky towards the northeast, means he was expecting something really good from northeast direction. And like throughout the morning means for the whole of morning, throughout that time, right? So he was very much closely associated with that, so he knew his fields very closely, and he had not done any of his work other than looking at the northeast in the sky, right? Because he was expecting rain here. Second paragraph. Now we are really going to get some water, woman. Now, children, Lancho here is talking to his wife, right? Lancho's wife, she is being talked to in the first line, as he says that, like, now we are really going to get some water. It means that rain would surely come, right? So, looking at the sky, Lancho asked his wife that rain would surely come, right? The woman who was preparing supper, that stands for dinner, the last meal of the day that we take before sleeping, right? The last meal of the day. So Lancha's wife was preparing dinner. She replied that, yes, God willing. Yes, God willing means if God has this will, right? If God really desires, so they will get rain today. So the older boys, see, several children are being displayed. The older boys were working in the field. It means Lencho had several children. So his older boys were working in his cornfield, while the younger ones were playing near the house until the woman called to them all. It means Lencho's wife called all the family members. Why? For taking dinner. What she says, see, come for dinner. It was during that meal that just as Lancho had predicted, big drops of rain begin to fall. So it began raining, right? As soon as they started taking their dinner, rain begins, right? So in the northeast, huge mountains of clouds could be seen approaching. Huge mountains of clouds that may result in heavy rain, right? Could be seen approaching means could be seen coming towards their direction. So the air was fresh and sweet. The man went out for no reason than to have the pleasure of feeling the rain on his body. And when he returned, he exclaimed, these aren't raindrops falling from the sky. They are new coins. The big drops are 10-cent pieces and little ones are fives. We all have seen coins, right? Currency. So what he says here, he says that like as soon as he went out to observe rain, he felt that the air was fresh and sweet, and why he had gone out, he wanted to take that pleasure, he wanted to have that feeling of the rain on his body. Means it obviously gave him relief, because that was badly needed by his crops. Rain was badly needed at that time. So it gave means the coming of rain gave comfort to Lencho's body as well as his mind. So see what he asked when he returned, he exclaimed. It means he expressed with happiness, he expressed with joy what he asked his family. He said that these raindrops are not raindrops only, these are not drops of water. He says that for me these are coins. Big drops are 10-cent pieces and little drops are 5 cent pieces, right? It means he directly relates that if rain would come, he would have a good harvest, right? So, a good harvest or having a good income from one's crops depends upon rain, right? So, coming to the next paragraph, with a satisfied expression, he regarded the field of ripe corn with its flowers draped in a curtain of rain. Which draped means something that is covered, right? Covered in a curtain of rain. He was satisfied when rain came, right? So he regarded the field of ripe corns with its flowers draped in a curtain of rain. He feels that his field has been he feels that his field has been covered with ripe corns, flowers, and those are all entangled in a curtain of rain that was falling at that time. But suddenly, see what happens, third line. But suddenly a strong wind began to blow, and along with the rain very large hailstones begin to fall. What we call that in our mother tongue, ole, right? So, like hailstorms begin to fall soon. The rain was converted to hailstorms, right? So, these truly did resemble new silver coins. So, Lencho, being exposed to that, he says that these are new silver coins, right? It means he is still getting happy. The boys, exposing themselves to the rain, ran out to collect the frozen pearls, right? So the boys too wanted to enjoy themselves in the rain, and they came outside the house to collect those like pearls, like white frozen, right? Next paragraph. It's really getting bad now, exclaimed the man. I hope it passes quickly. See the picture of Lancho and his field on the back side. So he feels that it's really getting bad now. It means when the rain was converted to hailstorms, and like he feels that his crop is not getting whatever was needed. In fact, like that much quantity of rain was not needed at all, because it could have totally destroyed his crops. So he exclaims, that means exclaims with sorrow, he expresses his views with sorrow, that he hopes that these hailstorms should pass away very quickly, means this should not continue, right? So he feels that the atmosphere is getting bad. Next is, he says, it didn't pass quickly. For an hour, the hail rained on the house, the garden, hillside, cornfield, on the whole valley. The field was white, as if covered with salt, means the color of salt, pure white color. So all his field was covered with that frozen, right? So those were initially like seemed as pearls to Lencho. Lencho was considering them silver coins. So next moment, like after an hour, what he thinks, he feels that his entire field has been covered with that frozen pearls, right? So of course he is not at all happy with this situation. His whole cornfield has been destroyed, right? See, last paragraph of this page. Not a leaf remained on the trees. It means no leaf was there on the trees, means that all the leaves have been shed away due to that heavy flow of rain and hailstorms. Next line. The corn was totally destroyed. Corn, I hope you know, right? So, makki, corn that was being grown in that field, it was totally ruined. So the flowers were gone from the plants, and there were no flowers after that rain. Lencho's soul was filled with sadness. Lencho's mind got disturbed. He became sad because he was expecting rain so that his crop should get sufficient water. But this much water was not needed, so because it destroyed the entire field, right? So when the storm had passed, he stood in the middle of the field and said to his son, A plague of locusts would have left more than this. The hail has left nothing. This year we will have no corn. The night was a sorrowful one. All our work for nothing. There's no one who can help us. We'll all go hungry this year. See, very sad statement. What he says, I hope the people from agricultural families may be able to relate it very closely, right? You know, locust means some kind of insects, right? That come in big groups, and these flies, these insects destroy the crops of farmers, right? So if they go in some area, they infect that particular crop of the field, they destroy it, right? So by that time no fertility is left with that land, and then they shift to some other place, destroy that field. So people often use fertilizers and like other medicines for like treating these locusts, etc. So what does he say here? Read carefully. Lencho here says that it would have been better if a locust should had occurred instead of these hailstorms. Of course, no farmer would say that his field should be filled with insects and flies, etc., that may destroy the crops. So, he here says that if locusts had come to his field, so those would not have destroyed his field that much, right? So, he says that insects and flies, etc., only partially damage a farmer's field. It means farmers are still left with 30 to 40 or 40 to 50% of their field. But this heavy rain, these hailstorms have totally destroyed Lencho's farm, right? So what he says to his children, he says that they will not have any corn, they will not have a single rupee to spend. So the night was a very sorrowful one, it was a very sad moment for the family, right? All their work, means whatever labor they have done on that field till that time, right? All their money that was spent on sowing off that corn, like everything went waste, right? And there was nobody to help them, there was no acquaintance, no friend, no relative that Lencho could demand help from, right? So they have to go hungry that year. This he says to his children, right? Come to the next page, students. So on this page, see if he sees any kind of hope, as I discussed in the introductory part. But in the hearts of all who lived in that solitary house in the middle of the valley, there was a single hope. And of course, I told you that was the help from God. So in that solitary house means lonely, like beside which there is no other house. So that was in the middle of the valley, and he could have only one hope, that was from God. What he says, don't be so upset, even though this seems like a total loss. Remember, no one dies of hunger, right? The writer is saying here, the author is saying there, or author is asking the audience that don't get upset over the situation. We feel that Lencho's farm has been totally destroyed, but no one dies of hunger. It means everybody is able to arrange food like by doing one or the other effort, right? See, next paragraph he says that that's what they say, no one dies of hunger, right? All through the night. It means this was also said by Lencho's family, that no one dies of hunger. They will arrange food from somewhere. So throughout that night, Lencho thought only of one hope, help from God, whose eyes, as he has been instructed, see everything, even what is deep in one's conscious. Conscious, बच्चे, concise mind is that inner mind, right? So to which all of us are answerable, right? So what he says that Lencho has only one hope, and he is constantly thinking of God at that time. And as he has listened from the people, as he has been narrated right? So what he had heard, that God is observing each and every activity that is happening there on this earth, right? It means God is observing Lencho's condition as well. So, next is Lencho was an ox of a man working like an animal in the fields, but still he knew how to write. Ox of a man, a beautiful phrase used. Ox of a man working like an animal, it means he was actually a very straightforward person. You may compare him to a cow, even, right? So he used to work like an animal. It means he used to do unlimited hard work, unlimited toil on his land, right? But still he knew how to write. It means, although like getting so much involvement in the field work may lead a person to become illiterate, or to become a layman, that is without knowledge. The author here tells that, along with that much hard work, and so Lencho still managed to learn how to write. It means he knew how to write a letter. The following Sunday at daybreak, he began to write a letter which he himself would carry to town and place in the mail. It was nothing less than a letter to God. It means, when he begins to write, so he feels that the letter would really reach there, letter would really reach God, and he placed the letter to in the mailbox. So the letter was nothing less than a letter to God, means he straightforwardly addressed that letter to God. See, God, he wrote, if you don't help me, my family and I will go hungry this year. I need 100 pesos in order to sow my field again and to live until the crop comes, because the hailstorm ellipses. Ellipses means blanks, right? So currency pesos has been introduced. See, he says that God, he asked God that, as God knows it very well that Lencho's crop has been destroyed and his whole family otherwise would go hungry. Automatically, if they go hungry, they will die, right? So he asked a help of 100 pesos. You may say 100 rupees, as it is written, a currency of several Latin American countries, right? So he, being a Mexican, writes that 100 pesos were demanded by Lencho for the fulfillment of their basic needs until their harvest comes. Along with that, he also needed that money for sowing his field again, because the crop was totally destroyed. So he needs to sow, sow, so he needs to sow the crops again. He needs to purchase new seeds for them, right? So in the next paragraph, he says that he wrote to God on the envelope. What he wrote? The address to God. Put the letter inside and still troubled went to town. At the post office, he placed a stamp on the letter and dropped it into the mailbox. It means whatever the procedure, right? He wrote his content, he wrote to God and placed it on the mailbox where he expected that it would directly reach God. See what happened next. Next paragraph. One of the employees, who was a postman and also helped at the post office, went to his boss laughing heartily. Laughing heartily means loudly. So, as you know, that was really, really a strange thing, that how can a letter reach God? So, when the postman took out Lancho's letter from the mailbox, he began to laugh loudly and showed him the letter to God, and he showed the people present there, right, that this person has written a letter to God. Never in his career as a postman had he known that address. Means postmen, usually they are aware that which city is located where and where they have to deliver a particular letter. And why he was laughing so heartily, why he was laughing so loudly? Because he had never known that address, because there is no address to God, right? So the postmaster, a fat, amiable fellow. Amiable is the one who is lovable, who is a lovable personality, who is friendly, who is helpful to others, right? Who always smiles, amiable figure, right? So the postmaster, a fat and amiable fellow, also broke out laughing but almost immediately he turned serious. Almost immediately means once the postmaster, the master of the place, he also began to laugh badly. All of a sudden, he stopped laughing and came in a serious mood, tapping the letter on his desk. Right? Tapping means to make a sound with hand. Tapping the letter on his desk commented, "What faith!" What faith means? See the level of faith. See, a man has blind faith in God. He says, I wish I had the faith of a man who wrote this letter. Starting up a correspondence with God. He says that means such a faith cannot be found in every man. Like that man is having such a strong faith on God, like he believes God so firmly that he is expecting money from God, right? So money is a man-made entity. How can God provide him with money? So he like such a firm faith he saw was nothing less than an astonishment to the postmaster, right? So next paragraph, see, he says that like I really wish that somebody could believe me so badly. Somebody could believe me in such a passionate manner. He too wanted to earn the faith of people. Next paragraph, he says that so, in order not to shake the writer's faith in God, writers means Lancho's faith here, means the postmaster wanted that if somebody has such a firm faith in God, it should not be broken. So, how would he save it? See, the postmaster came up with an idea. Answer the letter. But when he opened it, it was evident that to answer it, he needed something more than goodwill, ink, and paper. Because postmaster was initially thinking that Lancho had probably done a correspondence with God. Lancho had probably written his talk to God. He was not aware that Lancho has asked for money in that letter. When he opened that letter, when the postmaster opened that letter, he found that he needed money for that, because as it is written, he needed something more than goodwill means good attitude, ink and paper, because generally when we write a paper, when we write a letter, we need ink and paper, we need pen and paper, right? But in this case, in order to answer that letter written by Lancho, the postmaster felt that what he needed here, he needs money. So but he stuck to his resolution. Resolution means the promise which he made to himself. Stuck means fix, to to fix at one's decision. He stuck to his promise. He asked for money from his employees. It means he was a superior one working there, and he asked for money from his employees. He himself gave part of his salary, and several friends of his were obliged to give something for an act of charity. Obliged means they were actually willing to give. Like everybody, the salaries were very less. The money of, the value of money was not same as of today, right? So everybody contributed something. He too contributed a big part of his salary, and all his employees in that office, they contributed. Some of them contributed 2 pesos, some of them 5, some of them 1, right? So all of them contributed something so that they could build up, or they could continue to see that faith of Lancho in God. See, next paragraph. It was impossible for him to gather together the 100 pesos, so he was able to send the farmer only a little more than half. He put the money in an envelope addressed to Lancho, and with it a letter containing only a single word as a signature, God. Right? So, as I told you, 100 pesos was a big sum, right? A big sum. Why big sum was demanded by Lancho? Because they didn't have anything to eat at home, right? For survival, he needed money, and for sowing his crops. So that's why Postmaster, like what is the salary of a postmaster? That is also very low. So postmaster, along with his employees, they people were not able to collect those 100 pesos as demanded by Lancho, but yes, somehow they gathered 70 pesos, more than half it written. They will reveal in the next paragraphs that they collected 70 pesos. So they put that money in the envelope and send it to Lencho, right? Addressed it as to Lencho, right? So, and they didn't write anything else on that letter. They only did a signature, and that was God, right? Next paragraph, children. The following Sunday, Lancho came a bit earlier than usual to ask if there was a letter for him. It was the postman himself who handed the letter to him, while the postmaster, experiencing the contentment. Contentment means satisfaction, that feeling of happiness one gets, right? Experiencing the contentment of a man who has performed a good deed, looked on from his office, right? So this at this time, all the people were feeling proud, right? They were feeling happy, they were feeling contented. Why? Because they have helped a fellow who had such a firm faith in God, right? So Lancho came very early that morning to ask that if there was any letter for him. So the postmaster handed over the letter to Lancho, and everybody was looking at Lancho's face, that how he feels happy, how he feels after receiving the letter, right? So next paragraph, that is, he says, Lencho showed not the slightest surprise. Slightest means not even the least. Slightest means the least, very little, right? So Lencho showed not the slightest surprise on seeing the money. Such was his confidence. But he became angry when he counted the money. God couldn't have made a mistake, nor could he have denied Lancho what he had requested. See Lancho's superstitious attitude. He was not surprised. He was not astonished on receiving that letter and seeing money. Means he was so confident. He was so sure, right? He was so sure. He was so confident that God will send him money. But he became very angry when he opened that envelope and counted that it was not 100, rather only 70 pesos. Now, Lencho is also sure that God cannot make a counting mistake. Means God cannot make a mistake, like if God was to send him 100 pesos and he sent 70 by mistake. This cannot happen. Second thing is that Lencho is having so much faith in God that he believes that if God cannot deny his request. Deny means to say no to somebody, right? So he feels that God cannot say no to such a little amount of 100 pieces, because for God, like nothing is difficult, right? Next paragraph. See, this is the scenario of that post office, and the man standing here is Lencho, right? So the man standing near the window. So next paragraph, on the previous page we were reading, immediately means suddenly, all of a sudden, Lencho went up to the window to ask for paper and pen. It means Lencho wants to write second letter to God. On the public writing table, he started to write with much wrinkling of his brow. Wrinkling of brow means frowning, to show anger. Wrinkling of his brow, show anger at the forehead, right? So he showed anger and he started writing, caused by the effort he had to make to express his ideas. When he finished, he went to the window to buy a stamp, which he licked and then affixed to the envelope with the blow of his fist. Right? Blow fist means with the pressure of his hand. Right? He fixed the stamp. He finished writing it, closed that, and next is, the moment the letter fell into the mailbox, the postmaster went to open it. Because, you know, everybody was expecting that Lancho would have written a thanks letter to God. They were thinking that Lancho must be thankful to God that he has received 70 pesos, and that too free of cost, means by not doing any labor at all, right? So when they were all curious, they were all in a hurry to open that letter. So it said, they opened the letter and read the content. So see what was written in it. It was written, God, of the money that I asked for, only 70 pesos reached me. It means Lancho is not happy on receiving 70 pesos. Send me the rest. It means send me the remaining 30 pesos, since I need it very much, because he needs it very badly. So send me the rest, but don't send it to me through the mail, because the post office employees are a bunch of crooks, said Lencho. A devastating statement, a very disheartening statement for the entire staff, like the postmaster, along with his employees, right? So, see, they all did a great effort. They all donated a part of their salary. Like people these days as well, and always, like people have been so much money minded that they always hesitate to part with their money. Everybody is after money, right? So in this case, they were all instead expecting a thanks letter, but instead of that, what they got a letter that in which Lencho had called the employees a bunch of crooks, right? Why bunch of crooks? Right? Because he feels that they are all dishonest fellows, and those 30 pesos have been stolen by the post office employees, because he was of the view that God cannot do like such a big mistake, or God cannot do even a single mistake in counting or sending him money. Even God would not deny him such a little amount, right? So he called them a bunch of crooks. He requested God to send him rest of the money, to send him the remaining 30 pesos, but he also requested God not to send through this post office mail, right? He asked God to send it through some other means, right? By send him this money by some other means, by some other medium, right? So why? Because he feels that all these are bunch of crooks, these people are actually thieves, right? So he considers them. So that was again not being like educated fellows. So here the story ends. So I would like to follow a little bit discussion after this. So children, what he feels here, he feels that like they people being educated may or may not have minded such statement given by Lancho, right? Since they understand that Lancho is not at fault, right? He is so illiterate, he is so superstitious, or you may say he is so innocent that he is unable to understand that God can actually help somebody, like by sending direct money to them or not, right? So this was all about the story. So children, theme of the story is, firm faith in God, as I have repeated it a number of times while reading, right? So see, almost all the religions in this world consider faith to be a great virtue, right? Great virtue. So it's believed that an indomitable faith. Indomitable means that cannot be moved, that cannot be changed, right? An indomitable faith helps to overcome all the obstacles, all the problems of life, right? And those who remain firm with dog defiance, right, they come out with any situation, surpassing all the hurdles, all the obstacles of their life. So Lancho, the protagonist, displays outstanding faith in God, right? So he is so steadfast in his faith that he hardly ever thinks about where God resides. He himself even is not aware like what is the address of God, right? So taking all the things into consideration, we may say that letter, the title is very appropriately given, right? A letter to God means a letter which is sent to God but which actually reaches a person that is godlike, means that becomes a god to Lencho, right? So I hope you have enjoyed the lesson. Stay safe, stay connected, happy learning. Thank you.